All right, this is going to be a fun example of programming with LLMs. And I want to develop black and white film. I just got my new developer and I'm going to start a new project in my repo, GoGo Labs. So GoGo Labs is the repository in which I put all my little junk experiments. I have Cursor open. But first, we're going to do some data cleanup. I am going to go into apps and then I'm going to make something that's going to be called Sprint is just a brand of the developer that I use. So the thing I did is I took screenshots of all the instructions on the bottles themselves. So I'm going to go put this into command apps sprint developer. And you will see I now have these images in here that are literally just screenshots or photos of this developer thing, right? I'm going to do my standard pattern of putting in a little temp folder with my date where I'm going to store all the artifacts that I use to create a certain set of software, but they're not going to be long-lived things that I'm going to maintain. The first thing we're going to do is write a clear markdown document explaining how to develop different types of black and white film at different push, pull, and temperature based on there are three chemicals that need to be used for black and white development: the fixer, the developer, and the stop bath. We're going to start with the developer. I just put the screenshots in here and I'm going to start to store it. I'm going to write a document on how to use this and store it into sprint developer t10 01 developer dot markdown, right? I'm having it analyze and give me all of this information because I'm lazy. The idea is to write a document, to write software that allows me to do all this timing and is nice to use. All right, so I'm going to accept all, and then this kind of broke. I created it in the wrong directory. I knew this would happen. I should have put in command app in there as well. Well, live and learn. So I'm going to move it in here. And then as you can see, it's also broken. So I'm just going to copy paste the whole thing. So the problem here is that Markdown sometimes just fails because it has nested backticks. So in this case, it failed. But if you look at it, we do now have a pretty clean document. I did compare this with what is in there. This all seems pretty good. O is the film that we have. It's HP5 plus, and it's currently categorized at O. And you can see P5 plus is categorized at O. Maybe this table is a little bit easier to read. I'm going to do the same with film 4, film 4, film 5, film 6, film 7, film 8. Sometimes you do have to open the images, the files in Cursor before they appear in the add menu, which is really annoying. So here we're going to do the same. We're just going to extract all the data out of the photos. Oh, this is actually the fixer? No, this is the stop path, right? Wait. Oh, no, it's 8. This is the fixer, huh? All right, well, good. We'll just have to rename this. So we do have fixer here, which is empty. That's great. I'll rename this to, oh no, fixer is correct. And then, oh, I guess there's a document called stop path. So that's cool. And then now we're going to put the last ones in there. Film 7, film 8, film 9. Now do 02 stop path .md. So we're going to have like 3 pretty good markdowns here for the whole thing. And you can see the fixer can be used for print and for film. We don't care about print right now. For now, we want to do film. And what we're going to build is a self-contained index HTML app, which I find nice because you just copy paste an HTML file around. No framework. So now we have our 3 files, right? And we're going to assume that they're nice. The next step we're going to do is create an index HTML. And then we're going to go here. We're going to put on the agent mode and then use 01 developer, 02 stop path, 03 fixer to create a self-contained app for development in index.html, which we just created, so that I can select the film type, select push pull value, check optional steps, select temperature. Then I want a multi-step timer that warns, and I want to use Bootstrap for CSS. Do I want plain JavaScript? What was this framework that I was using? There was one that was, it was not Vue. It was like a semi-minimalist one that was based around components. Alpine. Was it Alpine? I don't think it was Alpine. Component-based JS framework. I think it was like a web component thing. Are we going to do self-contained HTML then? React, Vue, blah, 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 Svelte. It wasn't Vue. Actually, why don't I look at one of the applications that I used this? Was it Focus Stack? Yeah, it was my Focus Stack, and this uses LitJS. We're going to try it. JS self-contained file. Let's see what comes out. And then if the LitJS doesn't work, we'll redo it. So I asked it a shit ton of stuff here. That's because I know that 3.7 loves that kind of stuff and is pretty good at just making it all work. With other models, I would create a plan to do all of this, and I would do them step by step. It's possible that we might need to do this here. But, you know, why not give it a shot? The annoying thing is I can't see it streaming the index HTML here, can I? So we'll have to wait a little bit. This is the new compiling. So what I would do usually, I would start drawing out some more ideas on paper, because that's how I usually do my stuff. Might think about putting in a hand-drawn screenshot of what I want. I could start thinking about how to adapt this for print. Maybe I could add a little printout component to print out stickers for the film that I developed. This is starting great, isn't it? because it's trying to do too much at once and it doesn't know how to do that. In a way, this is a good thing because it will allow us to show some intermediary technique. So it wasn't able to do the index.html all at once, probably because it ran out of tokens. So what I'm going to try to do first is have it make a plan. Plan exclamation mark here actually refers to something in my cursor roles, which is when I add plan, then do a step-by-step with short code snippets, but don't implement it yet. This is what I'm going to do now. And then it's going to create this technical plan. I like seeing things stream by because it allows me to read and review them as they go. My brain is wired that I can read stuff at the speed LLMs usually spit it out, at least the slow frontier model ones. And I don't see it here. Having it contained is not necessarily the greatest idea because it tries to write a whole file at once. Instead, if I had a CSS file and a JavaScript file and an HTML file, it'd be a little bit easier. So maybe I should have done that. I like pushing things. 3.7 is still something that's fairly new to me. So I like experimenting and see how far I can push things. Extract film types and create a mapping of chart letters to development times. Create a data structure too. Create a film selection component, push-pull selector component, all of these components. I hope that these are optional step selectors. Also looks good. See these things here. I wonder if I should leave them in here or not, but they're already there. Might as well leave them. This is something that might be worth reviewing a little bit more closely. I'm not familiar with LitJS and JS all that much. I don't know if I even want to debug the logic before starting it. Usually this kind of stuff doesn't look like it's prone to hallucinations. This kind of stuff might be, right, like sequence stuff, but it has a current step structure, which is pretty nice. So I'm looking at the API of this thing here. It looks reasonable, I guess. And then the main application logic, this is pretty nice. I look at these kind of API things because if this is correct, I can always throw out the code and redo it, but it won't have to recreate all of these things. At this point, it's filled, and I know it's separated from the actual logic. It's separated from the actual rendering. So if I do need to fix something with the rendering, I can always split those out, right? And here's the main logic. So I'm not sure if this is linked to the UI. It doesn't fully seem to be linked to the UI. It seems to just do this. So what I'm going to do now that I have this plan is that I can, because it is numbered, I can kind of do like a do 1 and 2 or do 1 in index.html. And so I hope I gave it the right index.html. So there we go. And that way I can do step by step, which is nice because I can read things as they happen. Oh man, I really want to have this streaming thing. But also it doesn't try to do everything at once, which is nice. And what we're going to do is also starting to commit this stuff. Right, so boom. There we go. And you can see it generated the first thing. So it generated the head, and then it started doing this here, and it put in the Kodak films, it put in like the development chart, put in the different steps, which it parsed out of these tables, right? Like there's tables here. Let's see, mostly the developer tables. So this table here, these kinds of tables here, all of that stuff is in there. It's here. There's a bunch of logic. There's a bunch of styles. Okay, so now we can move on with the components, right? So I should have asked it to check things off. So we're going to do the components. And all these components look fairly easy. We're just going to check things. Oh, wow, we can check things off myself. This is very minimal prompting, but it's very targeted, right? There's no way that it can misinterpret this. It's a shortcut to say, just use all of these things. There's a chance I could have done this into multiple files all at once. Pseudocode 3.7 likes ignoring instructions where I said, just write pseudocode. And it's like, nope, I'm going to write the whole thing. 3.5 has tendencies like that, but not all that much. I might have to revise my prompt here to say what I care about is just this. In fact, I don't even really need to have pseudocode here. And then things like these might be buggy or tricky. I trust 3.7 in this case. And the structure of LitJS makes it, because it's event-based, it makes it very easy to compartmentalize things behind interfaces that have great names. So the temperature change event, it's clear that it's a temperature changed event. It's not like a click event. And because click events, there could be like 18 different ones. I'm not sure the name custom event is all that great. I don't know LitJS all that much. But if we look now at what it did here, it added all of these things in here. I'm going to assume that all of this is correct. I don't think there's too much opportunity for hallucinations. I'm going to assume that this comes out of the training corpus. We're now going to just add this to Git and say beginning of sprint developer app. If we go back to our plan, we're now at point 2. We finished point 2. Now we're going to create the main application logic. So we're just going to do 3. And here you can see that we're not going to run out of tokens, even though we're taking these huge steps anyway. And really, it's just copy pasting stuff out of here. In a bigger context of a bigger app, and this is why I used LitJS, we already have components. We can build these things on their own. This way, the way for AI, because they have a problem with big context windows, if you don't clearly separate pieces of your app so that they can be worked on independently, the AI gets completely confused, right? Like humans, you can kind of assume that they know how to disentangle things that might be in the same file, say if the UI and the logic is in the same file. LLMs can't, and you want to create your application so that you can work on things completely independently, even though the features that require them are tangled together. It's just clean software architecture. And certain patterns help a lot, right? Component-based systems are really nice because you can build your whole page and put in a timer component and then this component and this component. It doesn't matter what the timer component is. I don't need to know about it. I just need to know its API roughly. Or in the case of an LLM, anything that's kind of a timer component will fit the bill and it will be able to replace, even if it doesn't have the right API, it's like still a timer component. Like the semantic value of what you write is very important. So you don't want to call it like select drop-down component, but parameterize it on a timer thing. You want to call it timer component, and all the rest kind of doesn't matter. If it needs additional arguments and stuff like that, it will be able to infer those, but it needs to be called timer component so they can match it to whatever the timer component implementation is. It's a pretty subtle thing to explain, this like semantic-based component things, that the name of things is more important than their API, because in good software engineering, the two kind of go hand in hand anyway, right? You want to have clear names so that humans can understand that. And so I'm curious to see if this will work because I don't really know how LitJS works. So I don't even know if we can test this in VS Code. How could I test this in VS Code? Use the Live Server extension, launch the app with Live Server. Support all JavaScript features. Use a simple HTTP server. Gotta use the Live Server thing, huh? Can I use the JavaScript debugger with Live Server? Oh yeah, cool. All right, well, we're gonna use this. This is new to me. Live Server. All right, great. So go live. This looks ugly as fuck. Why does it look ugly? Is it not loading the Bootstrap CSS? Inspect. So that's interesting. And I should have split the JavaScript out, huh? Maybe. Because this is a form group. And then form group. Why is it not loading the CSS? I guess because it doesn't have any instructions. It does have the bootstrap CSS min here. So interesting. I'm not a HTML developer. I'm sure this is something completely stupid that I'm missing. Because it's loading here the utilities. And then the shadow root suddenly doesn't have all of this, does it? Yeah. So that's the thing. The LitJS shadow root doesn't seem to use the bootstrap CSS. And if I knew LitJS, I probably would know what's going on, but I don't. So what does it say here? By default, styles from DOM penetrate into the shadow DOM. This is a feature of shadow DOM, not a bug. To shadow DOM provides include bootstrap CSS in each component. Use constructible style sheets. All right. Yep. So here the question is, I hope that it won't generate too much code, but it does pull the whole index HTML into the context, which is huge. It doesn't need to know about all the components to do all the things. I don't know how good of an idea this is in the long run. Obviously, I would like to have a bundler. I don't understand bundlers. I'm not a great JavaScript person, so they always scared me. Maybe I'll just build my own. So this was pretty cool because now it moved all of this. Why is it oh, it's copy pasting all the stuff from Bootstrap. Oh, this is horrible. No, not copying the styles, but including the Bootstrap CSS in the shadow DOM. I'm sure there's a better solution for that. I'm not the first person that runs into this. I absolutely don't know LitJS. I just thought it was like a funky framework to use one day and decided to use it. Sonnet is pretty good at figuring out how to do these things to make a base class. In my head, I was expecting exactly that. So we can try it. And then if we reload, yep. This is nice. It refreshed. We can try this. I want to push it 2 stops. Temperature, I don't want the water pre-wash. This is all really nice. And then we can do start. And then we can do next step. We can do reset. So that's, all right. So this is cool, right? Because now we're going to be able to think about all the other things we want to add. Ambulance, fix CSS. So if I go back to the plan, we finished this, right? Because I think we did do all of this. I don't want to test this. Yeah, I don't care about this, but this is nice. Dark mode, toggle, history of previous development sessions, add custom film types. This is all very nice. Indeed, if time permits. But the one thing that I wanted to do is, so I'm going to start a new one here. I'm going to give the index HTML, it's the sprint developer that I want, unchecked by default, optional steps, unchecked by default. These are the features that we want to do. The dash that I put in front here is actually important because I want to make it a list of things. If I were to remove it, it would be more confusing that these are multiple steps. And for smaller models, I would prompt this very differently. I would say this is a series of steps to execute. I know that Claude is clever enough to infer that. And I know that because I tried these kinds of different minimalistic prompting approaches a lot. And you start to get a feel of which words are really important, which ones aren't. So here I know that dash is really important. Right, and so here I knew that the dashes would be enough for it to recognize this. The file is way too big, and so it has to read it all the time. With the agent mode, I think splitting into multiple files is probably better anyway. And it's also hard for me to know what it's doing because I have to wait for the apply to see the different structures. Right, so here it has restart steps, and then it has like add 30 seconds, restart step, and then reset, start, restart step. If I do plus 30 seconds and I restart it, oh, it should be like just 1 minute. I don't know how useful this is. It's not a great UI. All right. So here again, I use the dash because I know it will refer to the previous dash structure. Clicking step goes to that step. And we're 30 minutes in with one big rollback where this first index HTML didn't work. I think the idea of doing it into a self-contained HTML was bad, but it works, right? So maybe before we finish, I'm going to split the JS out into multiple files just to see what happens. Yeah, this would have been a much better approach, to be honest. This will make it easier for the agent to find the relevant stuff. It won't overburden the context window with all this crap. And it's also easier for humans to know what's going on, right? It's often what's to say is good for LLMs. And I very often do these little applications because I want them, right? Because I've said, like, why don't you just put a kitchen timer on there and read the table of the bottles? It's freaking annoying. I will have it every time now, and I can build upon it. But also, and maybe the most important one, these little projects are great to learn how LLMs work. People say it's great for greenfield and not good for legacy applications. This is a legacy application now. The 1,000-line HTML, which is not too bad, but it is at this point already legacy that is hard to deal with as a human. So this also teaches me how to refactor things. In fact, I learned about LitJS when I was refactoring a big no framework JavaScript thing. Here, I'm learning things about the shadow DOM, right? If I was more in the mood of learning instead of just getting it done, I would maybe go through a couple of LitJS tutorials by having the LLM create them for me, right? It's like, I want a film application, make me a course to teach me LitJS by building a film application. And then I would potentially write this stuff by hand without autocomplete so that I get to type it out. Or maybe I'll turn on autocomplete when I need to generate this HTML, but then I will stop at this and have the LLM give me exercises to make it and explain, like, this is how you would do it in normal JavaScript. This is how you do it with LitJS. Give me a really solid understanding of LitJS, even though I probably won't have written a single line of LitJS. So we do have now this split thing here. It's a module. I hope browsers understand this stuff these days. I'm not sure. So we'll see. Seems like it understands it, huh? All right, so we're going to add this. Hopefully this command worked. And Yeah, it looks good. So there you go. Now you have like a refactored app. You said this wasn't real code-based refactoring. Real life is way messier. You have to break things down at that point. If it's not easy to separate this into components, think about why there may be smaller steps I can take to extract properties into clean objects. This was easy to split out because I had already started component-based. That's why I went straight to LitJS. When I need to modify this later on, I already have a base structure that is self-contained. If I want to work on the main application, I can work on this. I don't know where the logic is in here. This kind of looks like the logic. So this can have unit tests very easily. I can add like a print mode, for example, if I wanted. So now I have this, right? And it's like, I want to develop HP5 at 2 stops. It gives me all this info, which is great. And I'm going to develop it at 22. Does that change things? This like fix of 3 minutes is a little bit weird. I'm not sure if I read that correctly. So let's go check. This is the fixer. Basic fixer, dilute. So it's 1 to 4. And then the charts are here. How to use. This is for print. And then here, black and white films for 3 minutes. In color fixer, it's like, I guess it's the bleach and fix step that I have, which takes like 10 minutes, but here's 3 minutes. One thing I can add here is for each step, add detailed information about what it should do. So this is something we have missing. I can trust my agent mode to have these different files and augment the application with detailed documentation about the process. And then for each step, also details. Then I'm going to link these 3 things, right? Like developer, stop path, and then fixer. I'm going to trust the LLM to surface some nice design patterns or UX design. Hopefully, I have a sense that I'll be pleasantly surprised by something that's better than what I would come up with. Sonnet is really nice at decomposing a 1,000-line application. It's much better than I usually am. I would have thought of putting the documentation in a separate file, but you can trust it to make these decisions and introduce this base element. It does these things, and it's usually really nice at doing this decomposition. I look at this code, and the fact that it has this kind of stuff is nice. Usually it reads like really nice code that's well structured and well decomposed with functions having the right scope and name. Like it's all very pleasant to read, to be honest. It's better than I am usually. It's as good as if I had 3 days to make it really nice. It's better than me in 1 day, right, where my brain at some point stops working. So now that we have all of this documentation stuff, it's adding it, and we can take a look at what the documentation looks like. Yeah, and then here it has, so this is maybe not the most prettiest way of doing things. I would maybe use the markdown renderer if I were to do this for real. But because HTML uses a lot of tokens, basically, right? Like this compared to just a dash is a lot. So I'm not sure what the selectors.js file is even. Oh, it's the film selector. What does it need to change? What did it change actually? So this might be 3.7 trying to be too clever. It's the kind of behavior I've seen where I say like add documentation. It's like, yeah, I'm going to update all the selectors while we're at it. I don't fully trust this stuff here at the end. Like, what is this? Why is it changing that? Like, I don't fully see a reason to change that. Is it being clever for the sake of being clever? It kind of is, isn't it? Yeah, so this is the thing that annoys me about 3.7. It does all of this stuff, and I don't fully understand why. So what you can do in these cases, and this is where, like, I don't think there's a reason to do any of this in here. I think this should be enough. to have it work. So I'm going to go back here and restore the state at this point. Undo all of this like 3.7 eagerness. I'm going to accept the documentation thing, and then I hope that it works, but it's broken, right? So process documentation has already been defined as a custom element. This was like 3.7. It really annoys me about 3.7 is that it's great for one-shotting things, and then when it starts doing this nonsense, I just go back to Cursor Sonnet 3.5. I've had this multiple times with 3.7. It's great for these huge things. It's less great for a targeted change, and then it tries to be clever, tries to be like the smart ass, and refactors the entire code base and breaks it. And there's probably better ways to steer it. I think it's also just like a prompting thing, and maybe Anthropic will revise it, because I think they optimized for artifacts. It's creating two files, one and another one called documentation.js with an uppercase. I don't think that's all that clever. I would like to rename it documentation data, but I'm going to wait until it finishes generating this stuff. It's introduced a component folder, which is clever. Like, that's where I want to have my other components at the end of the day, right? I think 3.5 is going to stop here, though. I totally see it going on, saying like, I'm going to move all the components over. So now we're going to see if this works. If I select the film, and then I do this, where does it show our documentation? That's the funny thing. So where's the documentation? Am I missing something? Yeah, I don't see the documentation even though I added it. Append node to the app container. Doesn't seem to be present. The documentation doesn't seem to show though. So this might be a LitJS thing again, because it appends it to the app container, but that's not how LitJS works. Yeah, that's what I suspected. So this is the kind of stuff where it probably doesn't know LitJS very much in the training corpus, and it can probably demonstrate signs of intelligence to do this kind of stuff with React because they don't think. So this is like, it looks like a totally legit JavaScript pattern to just append a component to a container that's already there. And so this is where things usually start to go awry. It's when it starts duplicating code and then it tries to fix it, but it doesn't know how to remove it. This is where I would like to, right, I'm pretty sure this will work at this point, but this is where I'm hitting my understanding of LitJS. I would need to learn just a little bit more about how to structure an app. So I don't need to write an app or know how to write an app from scratch, but I do need to know how LitJS apps are structured, how their event structure works, because then I can design the right APIs to compartmentalize these things. Here, I didn't know that to add a component, you have to add it to the app thing. Now I know ish, and hopefully I'll remember one day that this is what can happen. It's hard to know what this exactly means. Is this important or is this a hallucination? Why is it deleting things here? This is code that I don't understand. Because I don't understand it, I can't quickly make a judgment on if it's good or not. If it breaks again, I'll call it a day because I don't care all that much about the documentation. I came in and also didn't really have a good idea of what showing the documentation would mean. I wanted to have documentation here. There's a bug because we can't start it. We have to resume. So this is nice. I'm going to make it a branch. I'm going to keep a bookmark on this because I like it. But for today, I'm going to revert it. add documentation to the app. Then I'm going to make what I call a bookmark. Sprint developer with docs. Then I'm going to push this to origin, bookmark. And then I'm going to go back to main. And in main, I'm just going to go back to this point here. So now I undid the documentation thing, and the app should work. I'm going to reset and you select the film. It adds the develop. I'm going to add to push. Now that I reverted, I'm just going to make a commit for that. Revert the documentation. Going to push all of this. And here we go. We have a nice web app.